Disney White Noise by Wild Robot. Everyone has a darker side to them than they let on, and the man behind the mouse is no exception. Hi, my name is Toby Desmond. I'm 27 years old and my occupation consists of research on historical phenomenon. Occasionally I'm forced to step out of my comfort zone to take a look at something, whether it be an old doll or anything creepy like that. However, those are bearable, as it's part of my job to examine such things. But there was one thing in particular, one thing that you'd never think to be different. I received a phone call early last Saturday. It seemed to be a regular client, though he didn't seem like he wanted to talk for very long. His tone was rushed, and he barely responded to any questions I asked him. He told me that he had an old VHS tape he found buried in his garage, and he wanted me to check it out. Before I could even agree to it, he just thanked me and hung up. Now, I'm not complaining about it. It's not often I get to check out something like that, so it piqued my interest. Plus, I had an old VCR I received months before, so I was definitely going to see what was up. A few days after I received the call, a package came in from the mail. The label on the wrapping read, Disney, in black marker, but nothing else. I thought I hit the jackpot. Not just because Disney was one of the biggest in animating ever, and getting an old tape like that was huge for someone like me, but also because I had a son, Max, who loved that kind of stuff. I thought it would make some great father-son time, to sit down and watch some old cartoons, so we did just that. The episode on the tape? White Noise. The episode started with quiet static, which didn't last for very long, then quickly faded to an old Disney title screen, but upside down. It was odd to say the least, but it wasn't the only thing off about it. Instead of both Mickey and Minnie on the screen, there were two Mickeys, a plain white Mickey which looked to be a sketch, yet to be finished, and a normal colored one. But I didn't think too much of it, as it wasn't anything creepy, just rather strange. The title screen quickly cut to white, unfinished Mickey, sitting in a chair by a small table, sporting a frown on his face. He didn't do much, just tapped his foot for a few moments, until the last, I'd say, half a minute. Pete entered the room from behind Mickey, with a look of unease on his face, holding a baseball bat. His legs were noticeably shaking as he wandered closer to the mouse, raising the bat over his head. He stopped a few inches away from the chair Mickey was sitting in. Pete said something to himself, but it was too quiet to make out completely. "Are you the Mickey closed his eyes and looked down on his knees.
"Yes, now do it,"
Mickey said. After which, tears started streaming down Pete's face. He then swung the bat, hitting himself repeatedly over the head. Mickey started to grin and chuckle quietly. Pete's swings were getting noticeably harder and harder after each hit, and with each swing, Mickey's smile became bigger and bigger. Soon enough, his light chuckle had evolved into hysterical laughter. Eventually, Pete made his last swing, then fell on the ground, not making a single movement afterward. The screen then cut to Pete lying on the floor with poorly drawn X's over his eyes. Then the screen displayed a small line of text. "Are you enjoying the show?" Max and I looked at each other. A look of unease took over our faces. We didn't say anything. Instead, we just looked back at the screen. As we did so, the screen then changed to the normal colored Mickey, walking down a dirt trail toward what seemed to be a small warehouse, with an old plane in front of it. He had on the same silly grin he always did in his old cartoons this time, except every now and then, the film in the tape would shift out of place. It looked like he was dragging his body in midair while he was moving. Eventually, he reached the warehouse and walked up to the plane. Mickey climbed into the plane and ignited the engine, so naturally the propeller started to run. He then climbed back out of the plane and stood in front of it, tapping his foot with a concerned look on his face. Then he grinned and stuck his hand in the propeller. His expression then turned dread as he started to scream while his hand was being mutilated, and Max grabbed a hold of my arm as we watched in horror. Mickey then pulled his arm away from the propeller, stared at it for a moment, then began to smile. He then turned his face toward the screen as it slowly panned toward him. Then it cut to black. I looked at Max. He was in utter shock. He looked up at me and asked me what was happening. But I didn't have an answer. I couldn't tell him. I didn't know either. I was speechless. I didn't know that would happen. The black screen then abruptly cut to Mickey, standing in the corner of a dark room, nodding rapidly with a huge grin on his face. Max felt some sort of reassurance over this for some reason, as there wasn't anything utterly disturbing happening. Barely anything was visible, but occasionally, by looking closely, we could see Mickey twitching violently. After a few seconds or so, the screen started to slowly pan out, away from Mickey, so it became even harder to see. We leaned in to try and get a better look. Huge mistake. As we leaned in to see better, the screen then rapidly sped into Mickey's face and brightened, revealing a gruesome, clawed, torn-up face with a massive grin, bearing human-like teeth along with noticeably bloodshot eyes. Max went ballistic. He started to scream as he clung to my arm as if for dear life. He started to cry as I held him close to my chest, then he looked up at me. "Daddy, why is Mickey being so scary?" he said, as tears streamed down his face, still sobbing. I told him I didn't know. I had never in my life seen anything as horrifying as that, let alone in a Disney cartoon, which is made for children. I told Max to leave. I didn't want him to watch any more of it. He'd seen enough. I wasn't sure that I wanted to keep watching myself, but I had to. I had to. Not because I'm an idiot, and certainly it wasn't because I wanted to write some cheesy campfire story, but for the sake of curiosity. It was literally pulling me in. I had to finish it. There was no way I could stop it. The episode then cut to a straight line of text in front of a jet black background. Ha ha ha, H-A-H-A, repeatedly over and over again. No noise at all, just text. It then abruptly jumped into the mutilated Mickey's face, closer to the screen than before, and a loud, distorted moan rang through the speakers. I closed my eyes in an attempt to avoid the image, but I could still see it faintly in my head. After a few moments, everything stopped. I heard a faint fuzzy sound. I opened my eyes and looked up at the screen to be met with static. I thought it was over, and I let out a sigh of relief and reached for the remote sitting beside me.
No.
I stopped and looked back at the screen to find the static slowly fading, revealing a plain white Mickey face buried beneath the static. My mouth hung open while I stared at the mouse. It spoke to me. I knew I was trying to turn off the TV. How did you? I said, whispering to the screen. Mickey smiled, sporting a massive toothy grin. It hurt me.
Your heart will suffer greatly,
it said in a stern, deep voice. A series of ha-has then flashed repeatedly in front of the static, along with a loud screeching sound. I had to cover my ears, it was so loud. The remote was right next to me. I could have at least tried to end it, but the horrid sound made it too hard to move my hands from my ears. It didn't stop. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care if I went deaf just to stop it. I reached for the remote and shut it off, rescuing most of my sanity. My ears rang for a good few minutes, but luckily they didn't explode. I looked over to the doorway to find Max standing there. I scolded him for not listening to me when I told him to stay away. But he didn't hear me. His eyes were glued to the screen and he was frozen solid. "It's not over yet," he said, still staring at the screen. "What? What do you mean?" I asked him. He didn't respond. Then the TV turned on. The TV turned itself on. I looked back to the screen to find what seemed to be a snuff recording of the front of Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. Then I looked back to Max. He gave me a quick glance, then redirected his attention to the screen. How the hell did he know it wasn't over? How the hell could he know? The episode then cut to the park versions of the mascots in what seemed to be a dank basement, standing perfectly in line, facing the camera. I urged Max to get out once more, as if I could predict what was going to happen, but he wouldn't move. He just stared. The mascots started laughing. It started out quiet, but then it got louder. Soon enough, they were screaming, full-on crying and screaming. Some of them started to break down on their knees as they continued. Some of them just grabbed their heads and started thrashing around in place, but they didn't stop. They just screamed on, and Max was standing there perfectly still, staring at it without batting an eye. I attempted to get up and get him out of the room, but I couldn't move. I literally couldn't move. I was paralyzed. "Max, can you hear me?" I yelled at him, to attempt to break him out of his trance, but he didn't respond. He didn't even flinch. "Get out, Max. You've seen more than enough." I attempted to yell once more, but he just stared at that damn screen. It didn't even look like he was breathing at this point. His chest wasn't moving at all. Then the mascot stopped screaming. I looked back over to Max to find him crying, streams of tears rolling down his face, but he remained motionless. The mascots then turned their heads toward the screen. Then they got up and stood in the same perfectly straight line they had before. They then slowly reached into their sides and at the same manner pulled out large, gleaming knives. "Get out, Max!" I practically screamed that time. He started to cry even louder, as if he knew what was happening, even though his head was turned toward me. The mascots then raised their knives up to their own throats and slit them. "Max!" I screamed. They started thrashing around the room as pools of crimson started pouring from the cavities in their necks. Half of them were borderline laughing while screaming, while the other half of them just screamed in uncontrollable agony. All the while, Max just stared at the bloody mess, while I tried desperately to hold back vomit. The episode then abruptly ended with a still shot of the now lifeless costumes lying sprawled out on the floor, with one of them holding a plain white card with the words, "The End," scribbled onto it in Disney font. I looked over to Max. He wasn't crying anymore. Instead, he was staring at me now with a wide, unnerving grin on his face. He then raised his hands from his sides and placed them on his chin and scalp.
"Suffer,"
he said. He then broke his neck with such force I didn't even think he had. He dropped to the floor with his stare and smile still remaining. Everything was silent for a moment. Eventually, I gathered what was left of my sanity and rushed over to him, trying my hardest to talk to him through the sobs and screams, even when I knew he was already gone. I then looked over to the TV, and in the middle of the screen, I saw the plain white Mickey face, laughing, staring at me. Then it spoke to me once more.
"The darkest of secrets lie within the brightest of smiles. Do you see that now, Tobias?"
Then the TV shut off, and I was left alone with my son's lifeless body. I started to cry as I buried my face into Max's chest, holding on to his hand as it all came to a close. But my crying ceased and I let go of my son's hand, as I looked up at the screen and started screaming at it. "I hate you! I hate you!" I screamed, thinking that the thing could hear me. And it did. It heard me well. It heard me very well. The TV then cut on, revealing a gravestone with Max Desmond imprinted on the top, showing his exact date of birth as well as the day of his death, which was that day. All the while, white noise raved in the background, slowly evolving into a mad laughing. The screen then cut to the white mouse, continuously laughing, and he didn't stop. I wanted to laugh too, I really did. The whole situation was a mess. And it was my fault, all of it. Being a crappy father was all I could take. I was the one technically responsible for Max's death, but I didn't care anymore. I really didn't. But I wanted the laughing to stop. I got up and quickly reached for the power button on the side of the TV, but something held me back from doing so. My arms were being forced behind me as the laughter slowly ceased. Then a voice I hadn't heard before came through the speakers and spoke to me as I remained in my submission.
We're not done with you yet.